The conference room smelled of ozone and recycled air. Ambassador David Ross adjusted his collar and tried not to show his nervousness. Around the circular table sat representatives from 24 alien species, most of them looking at the humans with barely concealed contempt. The Dominion Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years, and they did not welcome newcomers who refused to bow. High Executor Talmuth stood at the center of the room, his forearms folded across his chest. His species towered over humans by almost 2 feet, with skin that shimmered like polished metal. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Humanity has existed in space for merely 47 of your years, Talmuth said. You have established colonies on 6 worlds. Your ships move slower than light. Your weapons are kinetic projectiles. Your defensive capabilities are primitive at best. David kept his face neutral. Everything Talmuth said was true. Humanity had only recently developed the ability to travel between stars, and their technology lagged behind the galactic standard by centuries. But there were things the Dominion didn't understand about Earth and its people. We came here to trade, David replied calmly. To learn. To become part of the galactic community. Talmuth's laugh echoed through the chamber. Several other alien delegates joined in. The sound made David's skin crawl, but he held his ground. You misunderstand your position, Talmuth said. The Dominion does not accept equals. We accept vassals. Your worlds are rich in resources we require. Your people will serve the Empire. This is not negotiation. This is mercy. David glanced at the data pad in front of him. The terms were clear. Humanity would surrender control of all military forces, submit to Dominion taxation at 70% of gross planetary production, accept appointed governors on every colony, and provide labor quotas for Empire projects. In return, humans would receive protection and access to some Dominion technologies. It was slavery with prettier words. And if we refuse? David asked. The room fell silent. Counselor Pratham, one of the few aliens who had shown any sympathy toward humans, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Talmuth's eyes narrowed. Refusal is not possible, Talmuth said. We have assessed your military capacity. Your entire fleet consists of 137 vessels. We command 16,000. A conflict would last 3 weeks at most. We would suffer minimal casualties. You would cease to exist. David looked down at his hands. Back on Earth, billions of people waited for news from this meeting. Children played in parks. Families shared meals. Scientists worked on problems that fascinated them. Artists created beauty from nothing. All of it would burn if he made the wrong choice here, but he already knew what his answer had to be. We decline your offer, David said quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. Talmuth stared at him as if David had spoken in an unknown language. Other delegates whispered to each other in confusion. You decline, Talmuth repeated slowly. You understand what this means? I do, David said. We'd rather die free than live as slaves. Talmuth's face twisted into something between amusement and disgust. How primitive. How wasteful. Very well. The Dominion Empire officially declares that a state of war exists between our forces and the human species. You have 72 hours to reconsider. After that, we will come for your worlds. David stood up, gathered his materials, and walked toward the exit. The other humans in his delegation followed. As they left, he heard Talmuth address the council. Ready the first fleet. 200 ships should be more than sufficient. We'll start with their outer colonies and work inward. Make examples of any who resist. This will be over quickly. The human delegation returned to their ship in silence. Once aboard, David made his way to the secure communications room. Admiral Rebecca Stone appeared on the screen almost immediately. She looked tired but alert, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. They refused the terms? Stone asked. We refused their terms, David corrected. They've declared war. First Fleet is mobilizing. 200 ships headed for our colonies within the week. Stone nodded slowly. Then we proceed with the plan. Rebecca, they have 16,000 warships. We have less than 200. The numbers don't tell the whole story, Stone interrupted. They've been the dominant power for so long they've forgotten how to really fight. They expect us to line up our ships and trade fire until we lose. They think war is a math problem, isn't it? David asked. Stone smiled, and there was something unsettling about that smile. They've never fought an enemy that refused to follow the rules. They've never faced an opponent willing to do whatever it takes to win, and they've never encountered humans who felt backed into a corner. You sound almost eager, David said. I'm not eager for war, Stone replied. But if they're going to force this on us, I intend to make them regret every decision that led them here. Get back to Earth safely, David. The shooting starts soon. The transmission ended. David sat in the quiet room for a long moment. Through the viewport, he could see the diplomatic station growing smaller as their ship pulled away. Somewhere on that station, Talmuth was probably celebrating his upcoming victory. The High Executor was certain this would be a simple conquest. David wondered how long that certainty would last. Back on the station, Talmuth reviewed the military assessments one more time. Human technology was laughably outdated. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were crude. Their defensive positions were predictable. The war would be a formality, a chance to demonstrate Dominion power to the rest of the galaxy. Counselor Pritham approached him as the meeting chamber emptied. I voted against this, Pritham said quietly, for the record. Your objection is noted, Talmuth replied without looking up from his data. But ultimately irrelevant. The humans chose extinction. We are merely the instrument of their choice. Perhaps, Pritham said, or perhaps we've made a terrible mistake. Talmuth finally looked at him. They have primitive weapons and slow ships. What mistake could we possibly have made? Pritham had no answer to that. He left Talmuth alone with his certainty. 3 days later, the Dominion First Fleet arrived at the edge of human space. 200 warships, the pride of the Empire, ready to crush a species that didn't know when to surrender. The fleet's sensors detected 12 human vessels waiting for them near the colony of New Dakota. Fleetmaster Quenthor reviewed the scan data and laughed. 12 ships against 200. The humans had sent a token force, probably hoping to negotiate some kind of favorable surrender at the last moment. He opened a channel to the human vessels. This is Fleetmaster Quenthor of the Dominion First Fleet. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be quick. Resist and watch your colony burn. The response came back within seconds. A human voice, calm and steady. This is our home. Leave now or learn why that matters. Quenthor closed the channel and gave the order to attack. The battle for humanity's survival began with those words, and nothing would ever be the same. Fleetmaster Quenthor had fought in 14 campaigns across his long career. He had crushed rebellions, conquered planets, and never lost a single battle. The 12 human ships floating in space ahead of him looked like insects challenging a storm. His tactical officer completed the sensor sweep and reported the findings. The human vessels were exactly what intelligence had predicted, slow, poorly armed with no energy shields. Their hulls were thick metal plating, designed to absorb kinetic impacts. Primitive but functional for their level of technology. Begin attack pattern 7, Quenthor ordered. Disable their engines first. I want prisoners who can explain why their species chose suicide. The Dominion fleet advanced in perfect formation. Energy weapons charged. Shields at maximum. Everything proceeded according to doctrine, exactly as it had in dozens of previous conquests. Then the humans did something unexpected. They ran. The 12 human vessels broke formation and scattered in different directions, their engines pushing them away from the colony at maximum acceleration. Quenthor watched with satisfaction. Fear was the natural response of inferior species when facing inevitable defeat. Pursue and disable, he commanded. Spread formation Alpha 3. His fleet split into 4 groups, each chasing different clusters of human ships. The humans were fast, Quenthor admitted. Their ships accelerated better than expected. But speed alone wouldn't save them. The first Dominion cruiser closed to firing range and discharged its energy cannons. The beam struck the fleeing human vessel dead center. The ship's hull glowed red from the heat but didn't penetrate. The humans had layered their armor well. Then the human ship exploded not from the energy blast, from something else entirely. Quenthor's tactical display lit up with warnings. His lead cruiser had triggered some kind of mine. A kinetic mine. A simple sphere of metal accelerated to a fraction of light speed, sitting in space waiting for something to get close. The Dominion shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, barely slowed the solid projectile. It punched through the cruiser's hull like paper, and the ship broke apart in a brilliant flash of atmosphere venting into space. All ships, emergency stop, Quenthor shouted. But momentum doesn't care about orders. His fleet, spread across thousands of kilometers of space, was moving too fast to halt. 3 more ships hit mines, then 7 more. The human vessels had been laying these traps for months, scattered throughout the entire system like invisible teeth. Quenthor's perfect formation dissolved into chaos. Ships tried to maneuver around the minefield, but every evasive action brought them into range of another trap, and while they dodged, the human vessels turned around and attacked. The human ships came at them from strange angles, using gravity assists from nearby asteroids to build speed. They fired simple railguns that launched metal slugs at tremendous velocity. Nothing sophisticated, just mass multiplied by acceleration, the oldest weapon in the universe. And it worked. Dominion shields flickered and failed under the bombardment. Hulls cracked. Systems overloaded. Quenthor watched in disbelief as his mighty fleet took damage from weapons his species had abandoned centuries ago. Then the noise started. Every communications channel suddenly blasted with sound. Human music, if you could call it that. Screeching guitars and pounding drums and voices screaming incomprehensible lyrics. Mixed with it came other sounds. Laughter, horror movie soundtracks, recordings of predatory animals, and the sound of human children crying. The psychological assault was devastating. Dominion crew members trained for efficient warfare found their concentration shattered by the sensory overload. Some covered their ears. Others froze at their stations. The carefully drilled responses that made them effective soldiers became useless in the face of pure chaos. One of the human ships broadcast a message in clear Dominion standard. A human voice speaking calmly despite the insanity happening all around them. You're fighting in our home. We know every rock, every gravity well, every hiding spot in this system. You're strangers here, and we really don't like strangers who threaten our families. Quenthor tried to organize a counterattack, but his fleet was scattered across the system. Every time his ships grouped together, human vessels appeared from unexpected directions and unleashed another barrage of kinetic fire. Then they vanished behind asteroids or dove into the planetary rings where sensors couldn't track them properly. The humans fought without honor or dignity. They refused to engage in proper fleet combat. They hid and ambushed and ran away when confronted directly. They fought like criminals, not soldiers, and they were winning. Quenthor's second-in-command appeared on his screen, face pale with stress. Sir, we've lost 31 ships. Another 47 are damaged. We need to withdraw and reassess. We outnumber them 16-1 still present, Quenthor protested. Numbers don't matter if we can't hit them, sir. They're using tactics our computers can't predict. Every time we establish a firing solution, they do something irrational and escape. They're not fighting like any enemy we've encountered. Quenthor looked at his tactical display. The 12 human ships were still intact. 2 looked damaged but remained operational. Meanwhile, his fleet bled ships with every passing minute. He had 2 choices: continue the assault and lose more vessels, or retreat and admit that primitive humans had defeated him in open combat. Pride versus survival. In the end, survival won. All ships withdraw to rally point Beta, Quenthor ordered. Maximum speed. We'll regroup and return with reinforcements. As his fleet accelerated out of the system, another message came from the humans, the same calm voice as before but with an edge of satisfaction that made Quenthor's blood run cold. Tell your empire we're just getting started. Every system you attack will be waiting, and we'll make it hurt. The Dominion First Fleet limped back to friendly space. Quenthor prepared his report for High Executor Talmuth, knowing his career was probably over. How could he explain that 12 primitive ships had defeated 200 advanced warships? But the truth was unavoidable. The humans didn't fight like civilized species. They fought like something wild and desperate. They used their home terrain as a weapon. They employed psychological warfare alongside physical combat. They refused to follow any predictable pattern, and worst of all, they seemed to enjoy it. When Quenthor's report reached Talmuth, the High Executor read it 3 times before believing it. 31 ships destroyed, 47 damaged. Against 12 human vessels. Impossible. The numbers made no sense. The humans had inferior technology. They should have been crushed. Talmuth called an emergency meeting of his military advisors. He showed them the report. He demanded explanations. None came. The advisors had no framework for understanding what had happened. In 3,000 years of Dominion supremacy, no enemy had ever fought this way. Finally, one advisor spoke up. Perhaps we underestimated them. Perhaps we need more ships. Talmuth nodded slowly. More ships. Overwhelming force. The answer was simple. Send enough vessels that even human trickery couldn't overcome the numerical advantage. Prepare the second and third fleets, Talmeth ordered. 400 ships total, and this time no mercy. Burn their colonies to ash. What Talmeth didn't realize was that Admiral Stone had monitored the entire battle from a hidden outpost. She watched the Dominion fleet retreat and allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. The enemy now knew humans wouldn't be easy prey. But they didn't yet understand the real lesson. Humans had spent their entire evolution learning to survive against impossible odds. Earth had thrown everything at them: diseases, predators, natural disasters, ice ages. And humans had survived it all through adaptation and creativity. The Dominion was about to learn what happened when you threatened a species that refused to die. Private Lucas Reed checked his rifle for the 100th time. The mining station Delta 4 had maybe 6 hours of air left. The walls were scorched black from plasma fire, and 47 of them were surrounded by 2,000 Dominion soldiers. The smart thing would be to surrender, but nobody had ever accused humans of being smart when they were angry. They're forming up for another push, Lieutenant Amy Washington said from her position at the blast door. She had taken shrapnel to her left arm 3 days ago and wrapped it in duct tape because they'd run out of medical supplies. She still shot straighter than anyone else in the unit. Lucas looked around at the other defenders. Marines, engineers, a cook, 2 botanists from the hydroponics bay, and a teenager who'd lied about her age to join the merchant fleet. This wasn't an elite military force. These were just people who happened to be here when the Dominion arrived, and who decided that dying on their feet beat living on their knees. How many civilians made it to the evacuation ships? Lucas asked. All of them, Washington replied. Last transport jumped out system 4 hours ago. We did our job. Everything after this is just running up the score. Lucas laughed despite himself. Running up the score. Like this was some kind of game instead of the last stand of a doomed mining station in the middle of nowhere. The Dominion forces had taken this system 3 weeks ago. They'd expected token resistance followed by quick surrender. Instead, every human colony, station, and outpost turned into a fortress. Buildings rigged with explosives. Civilians who knew how to shoot. Children who could assemble improvised bombs. The Dominion had won the system, technically. They held orbital space. Their ships patrolled the planets. But they'd paid for every meter of ground with blood and time and equipment, and time was the real weapon. Every day the Dominion spent securing one system was a day humanity used to fortify 10 others. Every soldier tied down on occupation duty was one who couldn't join the offensive. Every ship assigned to guard conquered territory was a ship that couldn't push deeper into human space. Here they come, someone shouted. Lucas raised his rifle and aimed down the corridor. Dominion soldiers advanced in formation, their armor gleaming even in the flickering emergency lights. They moved with precision, covering angles, using proper military doctrine. The humans opened fire. Bullets ricocheted off Dominion armor, but enough hits in the right places could crack even the best protection. And the humans had learned where those places were: joints, helmet seals. The gaps where armor plates met. 3 Dominion soldiers dropped, then 4 more, but there were always more behind them. Lucas fired until his rifle clicked empty, then grabbed another from a fallen comrade. They'd collected weapons from every dead defender, creating a pile of firearms in the center of their position. When you ran out of ammunition, you picked up a new gun. The Dominion forces reached the blast door and started cutting through with plasma torches. The metal glowed orange, then white. It wouldn't hold much longer. Fall back to secondary position, Washington ordered. The humans retreated through a maintenance shaft, moving through the station's guts like blood through veins. They knew every passage, every hiding spot. The Dominion soldiers had to check each room, each corner, never knowing if the next shadow held an enemy or just darkness. Lucas emerged into the reactor control room. This was their last position, nowhere left to run. The room still hummed with power. The fusion reactor providing energy for the station's basic systems. How long can we hold here? Lucas asked. Washington looked at him with sad eyes. As long as we need to. The civilians are safe, that's what matters. They set up their final defensive position and waited. Lucas thought about Earth, about his parents' farm in the countryside, about the girl he'd liked in school but never had the courage to ask out. All the ordinary things that seemed so important before the war. The Dominion soldiers finally breached the reactor room 6 hours later. They came in carefully, expecting another ambush. Instead, they found 3 survivors: Lucas, Washington, and a woman named Carol who'd been the station's head engineer. "Surrender," the Dominion commander said through his translator. "This resistance is over." Washington looked at the alien officer with something like pity. "Yeah, it is." She pressed a button on the detonator in her hand. Nothing happened. The Dominion commander's posture relaxed slightly. "Your explosives have been disarmed. Our engineers are competent. Now you will come with us for questioning." "You disarmed the explosives," Washington agreed. "But did you disable the reactor?" The commander's face changed as understanding dawned. Carol, the engineer, smiled grimly. "Reactor's been set to overload for the last 2 hours," Carol explained. "We were just waiting here to make sure you committed enough troops to the station. Make the cost really hurt." "You're bluffing," the commander said, but he was already backing toward the exit. "Maybe," Lucas said. "Want to bet your life on it?" The Dominion forces evacuated the station in under 3 minutes. Their ships pulled back to minimum safe distance. They watched the station for 6 more hours, waiting to see if the humans had been lying. The reactor didn't explode. Carol had been bluffing about the overload. But those 6 hours gave human reinforcements time to arrive in system. The Dominion forces, distracted by Delta IV, got caught with their formation scattered. 50 Dominion ships burned in the counterattack. The system was retaken by human forces within a day. Lucas, Washington, and Carol survived. They got rescued and returned to friendly territory. But 11 days holding a single station became legendary across human space. The story spread. 3 people made an entire Dominion fleet hesitate long enough to turn the tide of battle. General Patricia Cole reviewed the reports from occupied territories and allowed herself grim satisfaction. Every colony the Dominion took cost them. Every city required thousands of soldiers to hold. Every building might be rigged to explode. Every civilian might be armed. The Dominion had conquered 50 human colonies in 6 weeks, and it was destroying them. Their casualty rates were catastrophic, not from big battles, but from the constant grinding attrition of occupation. A sniper here, an ambush there, children throwing grenades, elderly saboteurs, medical personnel poisoning supplies. Dominion doctrine had no answer for an enemy population that refused to accept defeat. War Coordinator Silmuth read the reports and felt something alien to her species. Doubt. The humans were losing territory but inflicting unsustainable casualties. Every captured world became a drain on Dominion resources. She brought her concerns to High Executor Talmuth. "The war is proceeding according to plan," Talmuth insisted. "We control more systems every week." "At what cost?" Silmuth asked. "We've lost 237 ships. Our ground forces have 60% casualty rates. Our supply lines are overstretched, and the humans show no sign of surrender. They're primitive. They'll break eventually. What if they don't?" Silmuth pressed. "What if we conquer every human world and still face resistance? How many soldiers do we have for permanent occupation? How much can we afford to bleed?" Talmuth had no answer. He dismissed Silmuth and returned to his planning. More ships, more soldiers, more force. That was the solution. But across human space, Admiral Stone smiled as she reviewed the intelligence reports. The Dominion was doing exactly what she expected. They were winning battles but losing the war, because humans understood something the Dominion didn't. Freedom wasn't about holding territory. It was about refusing to submit. And humans would never submit. Even when facing extinction, humans would find ways to make their enemies pay, sometimes with blood, sometimes with time, sometimes just with the knowledge that victory came at a price too high to bear. The Dominion was learning that lesson, one costly system at a time. Commander Sarah Lynn stared at the decoded Dominion transmission and started laughing. Her intelligence team looked at her like she'd lost her mind, but she couldn't help it. "The irony was too perfect. What's so funny?" her assistant asked. Sarah pointed at the screen. "The Dominion just ordered their 5th Fleet to attack our base at Centauri. Except we abandoned that base 6 weeks ago. They're going to waste 3 weeks and enough fuel for 100 ships hitting an empty station." "How did they get the wrong intelligence?" "Because we gave it to them," Sarah explained. "We've been feeding false data into their communication network for 2 months now. They think they're reading our encrypted messages, but everything they're seeing is exactly what we want them to see. Breaking Dominion encryption had seemed impossible at first. Their codes were sophisticated, built over thousands of years of technological advancement. But humans had one advantage. They were really good at finding patterns. Human brains evolved to read social cues, to predict behavior, to find meaning in chaos. Code breaking was just pattern recognition on a larger scale. And when you added human creativity to the mix, even advanced alien encryption started to crack. Sarah's team had spent 4 months analyzing Dominion communications before finding the weakness. Not in the math, but in the psychology. The Dominion used encryption keys based on cultural references that were supposed to be impossible for outsiders to guess. But humans were excellent at understanding alien cultures. They'd been doing it to each other for thousands of years. Learning the Dominion's cultural framework was just another challenge, and humans love challenges. Now humanity could read every Dominion transmission. Better yet, they could inject false information into the network. Fleet movements, supply locations, attack plans, all fake, all designed to send the Dominion chasing shadows while human forces struck real targets. "What's our actual target?" the assistant asked. "Rigel 7, Sarah replied. "It's their main forward supply base. Take it out, and their entire offensive capability in this sector collapses." Admiral Stone had approved the operation 3 days ago. 45 human ships against 120 Dominion vessels defending the base. The numbers looked bad on paper, but paper didn't account for what humanity had learned in 4 months of war. Chief Engineer Robert Diaz had worked miracles with captured Dominion technology. Human ships now had functional energy shields, ripped from destroyed enemy vessels and retrofitted to work with human power systems. The combination was devastating. Shields to deflect energy weapons, but human kinetic railguns to punch through Dominion defenses. The Dominion had designed their entire tactical doctrine around energy weapon exchanges. Their shields were perfect for that. Their maneuvers assumed enemies would fight at certain ranges with certain weapons. Humans broke every assumption. The attack on Rigel 7 began with something the Dominion had never seen before. A human ship broadcasting a simple message on all frequencies. "Hello. We'd like to talk about your ship's extended warranty." The absurdity of it made Dominion crews pause for just a second, trying to process what they'd heard. In that second, 45 human ships emerged from the shadows of nearby asteroids and opened fire, not in formation, not following any predictable pattern. Each ship had its own plan, its own target, its own approach vector. The coordination was perfect, but it looked like pure chaos, because it was chaos, controlled chaos. The kind only humans could execute. Captain Owen Hunt commanded the assault from his ship. He watched the tactical display and made decisions in real time, adapting to the changing battle. When 3 Dominion cruisers tried to flank his position, he didn't follow the optimal evasion pattern. He flew straight at them, shields forward, railguns blazing. The Dominion computers predicted he'd evade. Their firing solutions aimed at where he should go. Instead, he went where he shouldn't, and their shots missed while his didn't. Human pilots across the fleet did the same thing. They ignored optimal tactics and did whatever worked in the moment. Turn left when doctrine said turn right. Speed up when you should slow down. Group together when you should spread out. The Dominion tactical computers couldn't predict it because there was nothing to predict. Humans weren't following a program. They were improvising, and improvisation was the one thing computers couldn't counter. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Rigel 7 belonged to humanity. The supply base was destroyed. 38 Dominion ships floated dead in space. The remaining forces had retreated in disorder. Human casualties. 7 ships destroyed, 14 damaged but repairable. The victory sent shockwaves through the Dominion military command. Rigel 7 was supposed to be impregnable. It was their anchor point for the entire offensive. Without it, their fleet couldn't push deeper into human territory. Strategist Valmis studied the battle recordings for days, trying to understand what happened. She was Dominion's best tactical analyst, responsible for predicting enemy behavior and developing countermeasures. But she couldn't predict humans. Every time she thought she understood their tactics, they changed. Every pattern she identified turned out to be coincidence. The humans fought like water, taking the shape of whatever container they were poured into. "They're not following any doctrine," she reported to High Executor Talmuth. "Every engagement, they improvise. They adapt to our responses in real time. Our computers can't counter something that has no consistent pattern. Then we need better computers, Talmuth snapped. With respect, sir, better computers won't solve this. The problem isn't our technology. It's our thinking. We've fought the same way for 3,000 years because it works. But humans don't know our way. They're making up their own as they go. Talmuth stared at her. Are you suggesting we abandon 3 millennia of proven tactical doctrine to copy primitive humans? I'm suggesting that maybe being primitive is their advantage, Valmes said carefully. They're not locked into patterns. They can be creative in ways we've forgotten. Talmuth dismissed her. The idea was ridiculous. The Dominion Empire had conquered hundreds of species using their superior tactics and technology. They wouldn't abandon what worked to chase human chaos. But across the fleet, Dominion soldiers were starting to fear engagement with human forces. The humans didn't fight like civilized beings. They used tricks and traps. They hacked Dominion systems and turned autonomous weapons against their creators. They broadcast disturbing messages and images designed to unsettle enemy crews. Worst of all, they seemed to learn from every battle. Tactics that worked once never worked again. The humans studied Dominion responses and adapted. Admiral Stone reviewed the intelligence reports and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Dominion was bleeding ships and territory. Their offensive had stalled. Human forces were reclaiming lost colonies. The tide was turning. She opened a communication channel to all human forces across multiple systems. Her message was brief. We're not fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for victory. Every system they took from us, we're taking back. Every ship they sent against us, we're going to destroy. They started this war thinking we were weak. Time to show them what humanity really is. The message spread through human space like fire. Morale soared. Recruitment centers overflowed with volunteers. Factories worked around the clock building new ships and weapons. The Dominion had awakened something they didn't understand. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to prove that arrogance had a price, and that price was going to be very, very high. Dr. Alan Foster hadn't slept in 3 days. Through the window of his laboratory, Earth hung beautiful and fragile against the black of space. Somewhere beyond the orbit of Neptune, the largest war fleet ever assembled was heading straight for his homeworld. And at the center of that fleet was the Annihilation. How long until they reach us? Foster asked. His assistant checked the displays. 18 hours. Maybe 20 if they slow down for final approach. 18 hours to save 8 billion people. Foster looked down at the equations covering his tablet. The math was elegant in its simplicity and horrifying in its implications. What he was proposing would work. Probably. But the cost would be catastrophic even if they succeeded. He picked up his phone and called Admiral Stone. I have a plan, Foster said. You're not going to like it. Grand Admiral Thexith watched Earth grow larger in his view screen and felt satisfaction warm his chest. 6 months of war, thousands of casualties, entire fleets destroyed. All because these primitive humans refused to accept their proper place in the galaxy. Now it would end. One way or another, the Annihilation drifted at the center of his fleet like a dark star. The ship was 15 kilometers long, built for a single purpose, destroying worlds. Its weapon could trigger a star to go supernova, consuming everything in the system. The Dominion had never used it before. They'd never needed to. The threat alone was usually enough to ensure compliance, but humans didn't respond rationally to threats. Thexith opened a channel to Earth. This is Grand Admiral Thexith of the Dominion Empire. You have one final chance to surrender. Submit to our authority and become vassals of the Empire. Refuse and we will ignite your sun. 8 billion deaths will be on your conscience. The response came from Ambassador David Ross, the same human who'd rejected Dominion terms 6 months ago. He looked older now, tired, but his voice was steady. We've already given you our answer. We'd rather die free than live as slaves. Do what you're going to do. Thexith felt a flicker of respect for the human's courage, followed by irritation at his stupidity. So be it. You have 24 hours to reconsider. He closed the channel and turned to his officers. Begin final preparations. If they don't surrender, we proceed with planetary elimination. On Earth, Admiral Stone gathered her remaining fleet. 78 warships against 400 Dominion vessels. The numbers were impossible. Even with all the tactics and tricks humanity had learned. This wasn't winnable through conventional combat. Foster's plan was their only chance. Explain it to me one more time, Stone said. Foster pulled up the schematics. Earth has 43 orbital fusion plants generating power for the planet. If we synchronize them and overload all of them simultaneously, the resulting electromagnetic pulse will be powerful enough to disable every ship in near-Earth space. Including ours, Stone noted. Including ours, Foster confirmed. And there's collateral damage. The EMP will destroy most satellites. Communications will go dark. Some atmospheric disruption. Potential casualties from systems failures on the surface. How many? Best case? 5,000. Worst case? 50,000. Stone closed her eyes. 50,000 lives to save 8 billion. The math was simple. The decision was agony. How long do you need? She asked. 8 hours to set up the synchronization. Then it's just pressing a button. Do it, Stone ordered. I'll buy you the time. The human fleet launched toward the Dominion forces in what looked like a suicidal attack. Stone knew most of her ships wouldn't survive, but that wasn't the point. The point was to keep the Dominion focused on the fleet instead of wondering what was happening on Earth's surface. Rachel Kim sat in her fighter cockpit and ran through final checks. She was 27 years old, had been flying for 5 years, and knew she probably wouldn't see tomorrow. Around her, 60 other fighters prepared for launch. Their mission was simple: create an opening in the Annihilation's shield grid. Just for a few seconds, just enough for heavier ships to get through. All fighters, this is Commander Kim, she said over the squadron channel. They brought their biggest gun to scare us into surrendering. Time to show them that humans don't scare easy. Let's give them something to remember. The fighters launched in a swarm, accelerating toward the massive Dominion fleet. Energy beams filled space around them. Fighters exploded into brief stars. Rachel dodged and weaved, her reflexes pushed beyond normal human limits by adrenaline and desperation. Her squadron hit the Annihilation's shields like angry hornets. They couldn't penetrate the energy barrier, but they could stress it. Every impact, every explosion, every detonation created ripples in the shield matrix. And then Rachel saw it. A flicker. A weak point. Just for a fraction of a second. All fighters, concentrate fire on grid section 7, she ordered.
Everything you've got.
23 fighters converged on the weak point, firing every weapon they carried. The shields buckled, flickered, and for just 3 seconds a gap opened. The Defiant drove through that gap like a spear. Captain Hunt had loaded every explosive device on his ship into the cargo holds. Bombs, missiles, mining charges, even the ship's reactor set to overload. He aimed his ship at the Annihilation's main reactor and pushed the engines to maximum. "This is Hunt," he broadcast on all channels. "Tell my family I love them. Tell Earth this was worth it." The Defiant impacted the Annihilation's reactor core at a significant fraction of light speed. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. The Annihilation broke apart in a catastrophic chain reaction, pieces of the massive vessel spinning into the void. Grand Admiral Thexith stared in shock at the expanding debris field where his ultimate weapon had been moments before. The humans had destroyed it. They'd sacrificed dozens of fighters and their own heavy cruiser to eliminate the planet killer. "All ships full assault," Thexith ordered. "Destroy them. Destroy them all." The Dominion fleet surged forward, and exactly 8 hours after Foster had started working, Earth's orbital fusion plants went critical simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulse radiated out in all directions, an invisible wave of energy that fried every electronic system it touched. Dominion ships went dark. Weapons died. Life support stuttered. Human ships also failed, but their crews had prepared. Emergency protocols activated. Backup systems engaged. The human fleet was crippled but recoverable. The Dominion fleet was dead in space. Admiral Stone's Marines boarded the disabled Dominion vessels and secured them one by one. Grand Admiral Thexith found himself a prisoner on his own flagship, watching through a viewport as human ships, damaged but functional, took control of the battle space. "How?" Thexith asked when Stone came to accept his surrender. "We built our ships to be resilient," Stone explained. "We designed them expecting damage, expecting failures. Your ships were built assuming everything would work perfectly because they always have. When the EMP hit, you had no backup plans. You sacrificed your own fleet to stop us," Thexith said. "We sacrificed ships," Stone corrected. "Most of our crews will survive. And we saved Earth, that's what matters." Thexith looked at the human admiral with something like understanding finally dawning. "You really would rather die than surrender?" Every single time, Stone agreed. That's what you never understood. That's why you lost. The battle for Earth was over. The Dominion's greatest fleet was captured or destroyed. Their ultimate weapon was debris. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the Empire faced the possibility of defeat. In the wreckage and aftermath, humanity had won the most important victory of the war. Not through superior technology or tactics, but through sheer stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. Councillor Prytham walked through the ruins of what used to be the Dominion Council chambers. Half the building was open to space now, sealed behind emergency barriers. The attack that destroyed it came from one of the Dominion's own species. Rebels who saw the human war as proof that the Empire could be challenged. Everything was falling apart. He found High Executor Talmuth in what remained of the military command center. The once proud leader looked diminished somehow, shoulders hunched, staring at displays showing the Empire's collapse in real time. 3 more systems declared independence today, Prytham said quietly. The Felnar, the Kothi, the Mercians, they're all following humanity's example. Talmuth didn't respond at first. Then softly, we were supposed to win. The math said we would win. Math doesn't account for will, Prytham replied, or for species who refuse to follow logical patterns of behavior. We measured their technology and missed everything that actually mattered. What happens now? Prytham placed a data tablet on the table. Ambassador Ross is offering peace terms. They're surprisingly generous considering. Talmuth read through the terms. Complete withdrawal from human space, reparations, dissolution of the vassal system, war crimes tribunals for leaders who ordered atrocities, but notably absent, demands for Dominion territory or unconditional surrender. They're not trying to conquer us, Talmuth said with surprise. They never wanted to conquer anyone, Prytham explained. They just wanted to be left alone. We're the ones who forced this war. 8 months. That's how long the war lasted. 8 months that destroyed 3,000 years of Dominion supremacy. The Empire still existed, technically, but its power was shattered. Member species were leaving. The fleet was reduced to a fraction of its former strength. The economy was in collapse, and humanity was offering peace. Admiral Stone stood in the same diplomatic station where this had all started. The conference room looked the same, but everything else had changed. The alien representatives who'd laughed at humanity's refusal now looked at her with something between respect and fear. Ambassador Ross conducted the negotiations with the same calm patience he'd shown before the war. Only now Dominion had no leverage. They were the ones accepting terms. We're not conquerors, Ross repeated for the 3rd time. We don't want your worlds or your species as vassals. We want trade, cooperation, and mutual respect. That's what we asked for 8 months ago. That's what we're still asking for. Councillor Prytham signed the treaty on behalf of the Dominion. His hand shook slightly as he affixed his seal to the document. Why? He asked Ross quietly. Why show mercy? We would have exterminated you. Ross considered the question. Because mercy is a strength, not a weakness. We fought you to prove we couldn't be conquered. Now we're showing you that we also can't be made into monsters. There's been enough death. The Treaty of Alpha 7 was signed 8 months to the day after war was declared. Human space became officially recognized territory. The Dominion agreed to pay reparations over 50 years. War criminals would face justice in neutral courts. But perhaps most importantly, the treaty included protection clauses for other species seeking independence from the Dominion. Humanity wouldn't conquer, but they would defend those who wanted freedom. In the weeks following the treaty, something unexpected happened. Alien species started seeking human alliances. Not from fear, but from respect. Humanity had proven they could defend themselves and others. They'd shown both strength and restraint. Admiral Stone retired from active service and wrote a book about the war. She called it The War Nobody Should Have Started. In it, she analyzed every battle, every decision, every cost. But the final chapter was about something else entirely: the importance of understanding your enemy. The Dominion made one fatal mistake, she wrote. They measured our ships and weapons but ignored our history. Humans survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and our own capacity for self-destruction. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us for millions of years. That shaped us in ways technology scans couldn't detect. We learned to adapt or die. We learned to fight when everything said we should give up. We learned that survival sometimes means doing the impossible. The Dominion thought war was a math problem, But humans are very bad at accepting mathematical certainty when it conflicts with our desire to live free. We saw their overwhelming force and decided it just meant we'd have to fight smarter. That adaptability, that stubborn refusal to accept defeat, is what won the war. Any species that wants to conquer humanity needs to understand. We're not strong because of our technology. We're strong because we spent our entire existence learning to survive impossible odds. Attack us and you're not fighting our military. You're fighting the accumulated survival instinct of a species that refused to go extinct despite everything Earth threw at us. The book became required reading in military academies across the galaxy. 10 years passed. The Dominion split into smaller federations, none with the power to threaten galactic peace. Species that had been vassals for centuries explored freedom for the first time. Trade flourished. Technology spread, and humanity became known not as conquerors, but as the species that fought for freedom and then helped others find theirs. New alien civilizations making first contact with the galaxy learned quickly to check the historical records. Every single one found the story of the Dominion War. Every single one reconsidered their approach to dealing with humans. Admiral Rebecca Stone, now 75 years old, sat in her garden on Earth and watched the news. Another alien species had made peaceful first contact. They'd arrived with trading proposals instead of military threats. Her granddaughter, aged 12, sat beside her doing homework. "Grandma, is it true you fought the whole Dominion Empire?" Stone smiled. "Not me alone. Millions of people fought. Some of them died so you could sit here safely doing your homework. Why did they attack us? They thought we were weak. They thought our technology made us inferior. They didn't understand that humans had something no technology can replicate. The absolute refusal to surrender when our freedom is threatened. Are we the strongest species now?" Stone considered the question. "We're not the strongest. We're not the smartest. We don't have the best technology. But we're the species that other species learned not to push. That's its own kind of strength." Her granddaughter went back to her homework. Stone looked up at the stars and thought about all the humans who died to protect those pinpoints of light. Captain Hunt, sacrificing his ship to destroy the planet killer. The defenders of Delta IV, the fighter pilots who'd given their lives for seconds of opportunity. They'd all understood something fundamental. Some things are worth dying for. Freedom, home, family, the right to make your own choices. The Dominion had tried to take those things away. They'd offered survival in exchange for submission. And humanity had looked at that offer and said no. That refusal echoed across the galaxy now. Other species remembered it when facing their own oppressors. The human example inspired revolutions, encouraged resistance, reminded everyone that power alone doesn't guarantee victory. High Executor Talmuth, living out his exile on a remote world, sometimes thought about that first meeting, how he'd looked at the humans and seen primitives, how confident he'd been in Dominion superiority, how completely he'd misunderstood what he was facing. He'd spent 10 years studying humans, trying to understand what he'd missed, and finally he thought he understood. Humans weren't special because of what they had. They were special because of what they'd survived. Every disaster, every challenge in their history had made them more adaptable. Their entire civilization was built on learning from failure and trying again. The Dominion had been powerful for so long they'd forgotten how to struggle. They'd forgotten what desperation felt like. They'd forgotten that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one with nothing left to lose. Talmuth wrote a book of his own. He called it Understanding Humanity. In it, he documented every mistake the Dominion made, every assumption that proved wrong, every lesson learned too late. His final line was simple. Do not start wars with species that have survived extinction. They already know how to win the only victory that matters, staying alive despite impossible odds. The galaxy learned, and peace, however fragile, held. Because everyone remembered what happened when an empire declared war on humans and instantly regretted everything.